So my first question is, what challenges have you faced being the first transgender state senator in the history of the United States?
Well, first off, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation. And for me, one of the challenges was um, pursuing an opportunity that for so much of my life seemed impossible. Growing up, there wasn't anyone like me in political positions here in the United States, at least no one who was really out. And as the old saying goes, it's hard to be what you can't see. So, in many ways, one of the big challenges was even conceiving of someone like me in a position like this. And that's one of the things that leaves me so inspired from my campaign is that we helped to transform what once seemed so impossible that it was almost incomprehensible to me as a kid, not just into a possibility, but into a reality. And it's a byproduct of so much change that we've seen in our society, so much work of so many advocates who've opened hearts and changed minds and allowed for me as a candidate to go out into my community, to knock on doors and to make phone calls and to be judged on my ideas and my experiences, not my identities.
What misconceptions have people had about you that were maybe discouraging?
One of the things that was a challenge and one of the misconceptions that I think sometimes people might have had, largely because of the media coverage around me, was that my desire was to run and serve as a transgender state senator focused just on transgender rights. But I was running as a candidate who was born and raised in this community, a candidate who was a caregiver to my husband, and a candidate who was going to focus in the state Senate on all of the issues that matter to this diverse community. Yes, that includes equality for LGBTQ residents, but it also includes healthcare for every Delawarean. It includes making sure that we've got jobs that pay a livable wage that offer real benefits. It's about I was running to build safe and quality public schools for every child, no matter their zip code. And so one of the things that I had to reinforce for folks was that I was running to work on a whole host of issues, and that I was bringing my whole self to the campaign, not just one identity, not just one part of my experience, but all of my ideas, all of my passions, all of my identities, and that I was running to work on a whole host of issues, just like my 20 other colleagues.
Are there any specific priorities you have when you first enter office?
Yeah, well, I'll be entering office at a moment of significant challenges, of significant crises for our community. First and foremost, we have to make sure that we face this COVID-19 crisis with a data and science driven approach. I think Governor Carney here in Delaware has provided strong science based leadership. And I want to make sure that we continue to face this crisis with that data driven approach, that we distribute the vaccine in an efficient and effective way that gets it to the communities and to the recipients that need it the most as early as possible. But I also believe that what this moment requires is us to not return to the world as it was prior to the pandemic, but to reimagine our world as it should and as it could be. The crisis that we're in right now has laid bare the inequities and the barriers in our society, from healthcare to education to our economy. And so my hope is that as we rebuild, we reimagine our economy so that it truly works for everyone, that we meet this moment with meaningful action. I think one of the lessons of this crisis is that no one should have to give up their income in the face of illness. And that's one of the reasons why I campaigned on paid family and medical leave, so that people can give birth to a new child or welcome a new child into a family, take care of their health, or serve as a caregiver to a loved one who's sick, without having to give up their income.
Delaware is facing a lot of the same challenges the country is facing as a whole, including the COVID-19 pandemic. Where do you see the need to take action against the virus?
Well, I think that first and foremost, we have to make sure that people understand that while there is a light at the end of the tunnel, it's never been more important for us to keep up our healthy and smart choices, whether that's obviously wearing a mask, whenever we go out, avoiding small in-person gatherings, trying to do as much remotely as possible. That's key to keeping the virus under control, or to getting the virus under control, so that we can get through the next few months, get the vaccine to as many people as possible, and then actually be able to reopen, and to be able to reopen without having to lose more and more people. And so I think it's critical, as we see that light at the end of the tunnel, that we use it not as a reason to let up, but to double down on our smart and healthy choices that keep not just ourselves safe, but keep our community and our neighbors safe.
Economically, small businesses have suffered the most in this pandemic. How do you plan to support them and help them get back on their feet? And for the businesses that have closed already, what is your message to them?
One of the first priorities I had after getting elected was to convene a collection of small business owners to hear from them about the challenges that they're facing. Um, we have here in Delaware expanded support for small businesses as they face the COVID-19 crisis. That means enhancing grants and loans for small businesses so that they can pay their bills even when they're seeing reduced or completely eliminated consumer purchasing and consumer buying. So we have to make sure that we continue to build on those programs that support our small businesses through this crisis. But at the end of the day, what we have seen is that we can't have a thriving economy if we don't take care of our public health. Our economy is built by workers. It's built by people who are on the front lines. And too often in this conversation, we pit the health of our economy against the health of our community and our workforce. We can't do that. They are completely linked, inextricably linked. And so we have to get this virus under control. That's the only way we can get our businesses open as quickly as possible. And so while we have to have these financial measures to support our small businesses, at the end of the day, the only way for us to have a sustainable solution is to get the virus under control, get the vaccine out, and develop the kind of herd immunity that we need to get back to a reopened state.
Delaware has ranked higher among lists of states with the best education, but the U.S. has fallen behind in the education sector, and that's due in part to a lack of funding for public schools. What do you think other states can learn from Delaware's education strategy, and how do you plan to continue progress in making the state schools better?
Well, we have a long way to go before every child here in Delaware is afforded a safe and quality education. Behind some of the aggregate data, there are real disparities in our public education system that we need to address. That includes addressing the structural challenges with funding that lead, in many cases, suburban white schools to get more resources than schools in our rural communities or schools within our cities. It requires us to invest more in early childhood education. I think that really is the key to building a public education system of the future that really prepares every young person for whatever comes after graduation, whether they go directly into the workforce, community college, or a four-year higher educational institution. The key is starting early. And Delaware lags behind our surrounding states when it comes to investment in early childhood education. And that's one of the big reasons why I'm a supporter of universal pre-K. For every dollar we spend supporting and educating students at ages 3 and 4, it pays off tenfold in the long run. And so it's key that we address the structural inequalities in our funding system so that every child gets the resources they need, every school gets the resources they need. But it also means starting earlier, getting families and young people support at ages 3 and 4 so that they can get a head start. And therefore, when they enter kindergarten, we have a level playing field, no matter the family's income, no matter a family's zip code.
It seems like in the United States we've accepted that our local public transit isn't the best, and in some cases just plain and ugly. Also inconvenient. So, what are your goals for public transit in Delaware, and how do you plan to meet them?
Yeah, we have a long way to go before we have a public transit system that is accessible for every Delawarean. Uh, So one, we have to invest in our public transit. We have to make sure that we provide routes here. Delaware is a bus dependent public transit system. We don't have a subway or a metro. We have Amtrak going through, but we don't have light rail. Delaware is very bus dependent, and there are significant gaps for particularly low-income communities and communities of color between service from point A to point B. We have to fill those gaps, and that requires funding. We have to improve our aging infrastructure so that we're limiting emissions, we're decreasing congestion, which will also have an impact on our environment as well as the efficiency of our public transit system. I also believe that we have to more fully explore some of the other public transit strategies that other communities and other places have implemented. But I also think beyond public transit, we also should make our state more bikeable. We should make our state more walkable so that people can get where they need to go with other modes of transportation beyond either bus or rail or car. That is actually a strategy Delaware has been pursuing very successfully. I think we should be continuing to pursue that path of making Delaware a more walkable and bikeable community and state, especially up here in Newcastle County, because that's also what folks are looking for when they're deciding where to live. And that's one of the reasons why more and more young people are moving to large cities, because they're so walkable, because you can get from point A to point B without having to get in a car or a bus or a train. And to make sure to compete for talent, to make sure that we're attracting more families and to support people in healthy living, we should be making Delaware more bikeable and more walkable.
Over the summer, racial justice became a hot topic following the death of George Floyd. What reforms do you believe need to take place when it comes to police departments, and do you support the movement to defund law enforcement?
I think one of the first steps here in Delaware that we have to take is reforming our laws that limit transparency and accountability. Delaware has actually one of the most restrictive transparency rules when it comes to law enforcement in the country. Right now, in a criminal defense proceeding, it's incredibly difficult for defense attorneys to get access to personnel files for law enforcement, incredibly relevant records when it comes to a criminal case that's proceeding. Right now in Delaware, personnel records are sealed even when a law enforcement officer who may have been fired from the job for excessive force or for unethical behavior is applying for another law enforcement position in another area of Delaware. That area can't get the personnel files from their previous place of employment, despite how relevant that information is. So here in Delaware, the first step is making sure that we build a more transparent and accountable system. More broadly, we do have to reimagine public safety. We have to invest more in our communities because we know that crime is a byproduct, not in most cases of ill intent, but in many cases it's survival. And we have to address poverty. We have to enhance mental health services and healthcare availability for people. We have to ensure affordable housing for every Delawarean, because at the end of the day, the only way to address crime and public safety is to address the root causes of crime. And in many cases, that's poverty, a lack of economic opportunity, and a lack of housing and healthcare.
Finally, climate change has become a priority for some politicians, and for others, it's at the bottom of the totem pole. Where do you see climate change as a priority on your list, and what will you do to slow its effects on your constituents?
It's critical. Addressing climate change is necessary. Morally, it's critical for our planet. And frankly, it's an opening for our economy. Green jobs are the jobs of the future, and they are the best path forward to address the toll that climate change is taking on our communities. Delaware is one of the lowest lying states in the nation, and depending on the metrics you use, the lowest lying state in the nation. My district is a district that runs along the Delaware River, and too many of my neighbors are at risk with rising sea levels. So we need to make sure here in Delaware that we're positioning ourselves to attract a green economy and attract green jobs and build a green economy. That includes more investment in solar energy. It also includes more investment in wind energy. Delaware is the only state on the eastern seaboard that doesn't have a firm commitment to wind energy. I think we need to change that. This legislative session, I'm excited that we're going to increase what we call the renewable portfolio standard. So that's the percentage of our energy that comes from renewable sources. We're going to increase that so that Delaware can do our part, our small part, but our part in addressing the global crisis of climate change.
Delaware State Senator-elect Sarah McBride, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great talking with you and fantastic questions.